Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Miuch and you are watching Context. Islamophobia, the hate, fear and prejudice towards Muslims is on the rise, according to national and regional statistics throughout the world. The United States has seen a 7% increase in the number of Islamophobic incidents in 2024, leading to the highest ever number of cases the Council on American-Islamic Relations recorded. The most recent European Islamophobia report finds that in spite of the UN declaring an international day to combat Islamophobia, anti-Muslim racism practically remains unrecognized, with its existence often denied by many European governments, political parties, institutions, and even journalists and intellectuals. A large spike in Islamophobia, but also anti-Semitism, was brought about by Israel's 19-month war in Gaza in response to the Hamas attack of October 2023. On the hate, discriminatory policies, racist violence, and how to combat it, we're talking with Ayhan Sarı, Associate Professor at the Turkish-German University, coming to us from Istanbul. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the war in Gaza. The sheer brutality and the scale of the conflict has, according to all the metrics in various parts of the world, brought a sharp increase in the hate towards Muslims and Jews. How much of that would you say is owed to the conflation of Muslims with various armed groups and Jews with the Israeli state?
Hello, and thank you for having me. And your question regarding to Gaza conflict, we can easily say that the conflict in Gaza has reignited anti-Muslim stereotypes in global media. We again started to see many stereotypes being such as Islamist, terrorist, Islamist organization, and we saw that many bad phrases are connected somehow in global media with Islam and with Muslims, and that obviously adds to this Islamophobia in the whole Western world. And we see also increasingly with the Gaza conflict that Muslims are often portrayed as inherently violent or extremist. And we saw this the same scenario in the second Iraq Gulf War in Afghanistan, and afterwards also in Middle East, especially regarding to Gaza conflict. Again and again, Western media, Western global media, and political leaders portray Muslims as inherently violent and extremist. It naturally adds to the Islamophobic thinking in the Western societies. And we see also that political leaders strategically use this Islamophobic language against Muslims to delegitimize Muslim voices and justify repression. We all know that in Gaza is running a massacre, and there are lots of war crimes according to many international organizations. And to cover these war crimes and massacres, they try to delegitimize Muslims and Muslim voices. And of course, it also adds to the Islamophobic rise in the Western society and Western political order.
Well, on the global level, the UN has established the International Day to Combat Islamophobia in 2022. Anti-Muslim racism has, however, been present long before. You've mentioned some of the conflicts. There were wars also in Bosnia, Azerbaijan, Kosovo. Then following the 9/11 attacks, the 2015 refugee crisis in Europe, and so on. There are many, many examples. How important is it to have international recognition of this problem? And how many of those international days would you say it would take to truly shine a light on Islamophobia?
I think we are far, far away from bringing a real remedy to that problem, because we see that Western societies, Western states face several crises in the last decade. It started with the pandemic in 2020. Afterwards, we saw Ukraine-Russia war in 2022, and it all add to the rising economic instabilities, political turmoils in the Western society. And we know again and again this crisis fueled fear and uncertainty in Western society in each cases, and at the end of the day, far-right and populist parties have used these fears to gain ground. And if we closely focus on the Western societies now, they have a big problem with rising far-right parties and populist parties. For example, in Germany, we have a AfD example. They were second in the general elections in February 2025, and just after a couple of months after this election, we see in several surveys that this far-right party, AfD, is the first party in the Germany. Again, we see the similar example in France. There is the party of the Le Pen, and this party, National Unity, is also in the first place. And at the end of the day, we can easily say Western societies, Western states have many structural problems, economic problems, security-related problems, and to distract and divide and mobilize their voters, they use always Islamophobia. And despite Muslims are not linked with this crisis, with pandemic, with Russian-Ukraine crisis, or with the economic problems, they, far-right populist parties, use Muslims often as scapegoat to cover these problems, and unfortunately, they still could not find any remedies to this problem, because Western countries, Western societies cannot solve their structural problems at the end of the day.
You've mentioned the examples of AfD in Germany and then France. There was also Austria's FPO that won the election. Truth be told, they are not in power right now, but many far-right parties have made the refugee crisis the root cause of their anti-immigration slogans and policies. They campaign to re-migrate and deport. Even the somewhat traditionally center or center-right parties have recently adopted similar anti-migration policies to be able to come into or stay in power. What do you make of such a trend?
Yes, this is obviously a big problem in the Western countries. We see two problems. First, far-right and populist parties are rising. And second, to get the vote of the new voters who are lean to far-right and populist parties, the parties at the center are shifting to the right, as CDU, CSU in Germany, or a couple of parties in Austria and in France. And we can also easily say what does have the war in Ukraine and Russia with the rising refugees. Everyone knows that the Russian and Ukraine conflict bring a lot of problems to the Western countries. Economic problems, security problems. We see that the prosperity, welfare state is decreasing in the Western Europe. But these problems need institutional and structural solutions. Instead of bringing these issues in the forefront and solving the long-standing problems, at the end of the day, they always choose Muslims and refugees as an excuse and try to hide the real problems. Why? Because this brings in Western countries a lot of votes currently, and we see an increasing Islamophobia because of this many structural and institutional problems that the Western politicians do not want to face.
Let's go briefly to the east. What does the plight of peoples, Rohingyas, Uyghurs, and the Kashmir people tell us about Islamophobia? Would you say that the root causes of Islamophobia are very different to those in the West, or are the foundations the same?
I can say one thing very clearly. Why do they choose Muslims as a target? Because Muslims are very weak at the moment. We see that the Eastern countries like China or Western countries like France, Germany have not strong Muslim diasporas who can affect the results of the election or who have an economically advantaged position. And they are easier to target and they are easier to take as a target in this both societies. And unfortunately, there are not many world powers who can be behind this Muslim societies, Muslim diasporas, and protect their rights. I think this is the most important part why they choose to attack Muslims in these various countries. You can make draw a similarity with Jews around the world. If you attack a Jew or if we see a rising anti-Semitism, we see that Israel or United States protect these vulnerable people. But Muslims have no world power who can protect them and be behind them.
Where do the majority Muslim countries fit in here? Can they help? Can they help combat Islamophobia on the world stage? If so, how and who?
As far as I know, we have a big conference in Azerbaijan now, and they are discussing rising Islamophobia in the whole world. I think this is a very good starting point. And we have a professor, Enes Bayraklı, who is the author of the Islamophobia in European countries, is also in Azerbaijan, in Baku now, and they are discussing with other scholars who came from other parts of the world. I think this is a very, very good starting point. We should start to discuss this problem. We should explain the Western societies, Eastern societies, that we are aware of the rising Islamophobia and we want and we will protect the Muslim societies in abroad. I think so can we have a good starting point, but at the end we should be able to also materially protect these vulnerable countries at the end of the day, because without this material protection, material support of these diasporas, I think Western countries will continue to target Muslims in different countries, and the Islamophobia will continue to rise. And last but not least, we should not forget that United Nations is not capable of resolving this type of problems. We could easily and clearly see that how incapable United Nations was in Gaza conflict, for example. There are a lot of war crimes, massacres, but they are not able to solve this problem and end the conflict. So at the end of the day, nation states will be responsible to bring a remedy to this to the rising Islamophobia.
And finally, when it comes to the fight against Islamophobia on the ground, locally, what tools are there? How many of those depend on the outreach and integration of Muslim communities, especially in the West?
This is, I think, very, very good question. The first step should be that these Muslim societies who live abroad should be integrated in the political system. Because in Western countries, if you do not have the right to vote, then they don't listen to you. For example, in Germany, we know that there are living approximately 5 million Turkish origin people. And if you ask how many of them can vote, I think it's only 100 or 200,000. Not even 500,000, not even 20% of the Turkish diaspora who live in Germany can vote. And what does it mean? It means they have no political influence over these political parties. So first, these diasporas, Muslims, should be integrated in the political system in each country and should build political influence over these parties. I think this is the most important strategy that they should follow.
And with that, thank you, Ayhan, so much for joining us and offering us your insights and opinions.
Thank you, and have a nice day.
And thank you for watching. That's all we had for you in this edition of Context. But do stay tuned to AnewZ.